Hey everybody, and welcome back to another deep dive.
Hi, everyone.
I'm Ajith, and I'm here with Rebecca, our expert, to talk about a heavy topic today.
Yes, that's right.
We're talking about the 2025 LA wildfire.
Yeah, I'm excited to kind of dig in a little deeper.
Yeah, we're calling this one Burned Earth.
Oh, I like that.
And we're going to be talking about, the long-term consequences of the wildfires and kind of, some of the things that we don't often think about when we see these images,
Right.
on the news.
Exactly.
So, one of the things that struck me when I was looking at the research was just how mind-boggling some of the facts are.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
When you really start to dig into it.
It's more than just ash and, charred landscapes. It's about how these events completely disrupt ecosystems.
Right. I think that's one of the things we really want to get into in this podcast is how everything's so connected.
Everything's connected.
And I think that's something that's so easy to forget when we see these things happening. We see the images on the news, we see the fires burning, we see the immediate destruction, but we don't necessarily think about
the ripple effects.
The ripple effects, yeah. And one of the things that really struck me was reading about how these fires displace so many animals.
Oh, absolutely.
And force them into these urban areas.
Yeah, can you imagine you're a deer or a coyote or even a mountain lion, and suddenly you're being pushed out of your habitat. You're thrust into this completely unfamiliar territory, having to compete for resources and potentially even having encounters with domestic animals.
Right.
It's a fight for survival. And when you have that kind of upheaval, it often leads to a loss of biodiversity.
Biodiversity. Now, remind me again, why is that such a big deal?
So think of it like a Jenga tower, okay? Wow. Each species, no matter how small or insignificant, plays a role in keeping that whole ecosystem stable,
Okay.
You remove one block and the tower might start to wobble.
Right.
Remove enough, and the whole thing collapses.
I like that. That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
And speaking of losing pieces, one of the reports mentioned the California condor.
Oh, yes.
And how these fires are just, devastating for them. Yeah.
Absolutely. They were already on the brink of extinction.
Right.
And now they're facing the loss of their nesting grounds, their food sources. It's like taking, 2 steps back after years of painstaking progress.
Yeah.
And trying to bring them back.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is.
And, speaking of things that are really impacting us as humans, beyond the obvious destruction. One of the things we have to talk about is the air quality.
The smoke.
Yeah, the wildfire smoke.
It's awful.
We all know it's bad, but some of the reports you sent get into some pretty, disturbing detail.
No, it's more than just unpleasant,
Yeah.
That smoke is filled with all sorts of nasty stuff, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides.
Right.
But the real culprit is this tiny particulate matter called PM 2.5.
PM 2.5. Yeah, I've heard that before.
Yeah, so it's so small, like 30 times smaller than the width of a human hair.
Wow.
That it can actually bypass your body's natural defenses.
Oh, wow.
And lodge deep into your lungs, and it just wreaks havoc on your respiratory system.
That is scary.
It is.
And it makes sense now when the reports were talking about this, increase in hospital visits.
Oh, yeah.
Even for people who were miles away from the fires.
Absolutely. And one of the articles even talked about wildfire smoke from California impacting air quality all the way on the East Coast.
That's insane.
It's a stark reminder that air pollution doesn't respect state lines.
Right. We're all connected.
And, when we talk about things that are connected, we have to talk about the climate.
Yes, absolutely.
And, climate change, and I remember reading this in one of our reports, this number that these fires released millions of tons of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere.
It's a massive number.
It's hard to even wrap your head around a number that big.
It's a massive contribution to the problem of climate change. And what's really scary is that it creates a vicious cycle.
Explain that.
So these fires release greenhouse gases, right, which warm the planet, which leads to hotter, drier conditions.
Right.
Which make future fires even more likely.
So it just keeps feeding itself.
It's a terrifying feedback loop.
Yeah, it's like we're not just dealing with the immediate consequences.
Exactly.
We're also fueling the very conditions that lead to more fires.
Exactly.
Now, in all of this doom and gloom, I did see a little glimmer of hope.
Okay.
And it had to do with, nature's ability to bounce back.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, nature is remarkably resilient,
Yeah.
Certain plants like those chaparral shrubs native to California,
Okay.
they've actually evolved to thrive in fire-prone environments.
Oh, wow.
Their seeds actually need the heat to germinate.
Oh, that's interesting.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not all, completely hopeless.
No, not at all.
And there are things that we can do to help nature along, right?
Yes.
Like reforestation and controlling invasive species. I remember reading about that.
Absolutely. Reforestation efforts are crucial to restoring those carbon-absorbing forests and, invasive species, which often kind of take advantage of these disturbed areas.
Right.
They need to be managed so they don't outcompete the native plants that are trying to recover.
Right. And I also remember reading about controlled burns.
Oh, yes.
What is that?
It's a fascinating strategy. It's about using fire as a tool.
Really?
Intentionally setting small controlled burns to clear out excess vegetation that could fuel larger wildfires.
That's so interesting.
It's a way of working with nature rather than against it.
I want to know more about that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a topic for a future podcast.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think for now, we've covered a lot of ground. We've seen how these wildfires impact everything from wildlife to the air we breathe and even the global climate.
It's all connected.
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest takeaway here is just how interconnected all of these issues really are.
Absolutely. And, understanding that is the first step towards finding solutions.
Right.
So.
Well, this has definitely given me a lot to think about.
Me too.
Rebecca, thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been my pleasure.
And to all of you listening, thanks for sending in these sources. It's clear that you're thinking deeply about this, and we encourage you to keep exploring this and, come to your own conclusions. And we'll be back with more deep dives soon. So until then, stay curious.
Bye, everyone.